Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Ange Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about my Week 1 tight end rankings going into the 2020 fantasy football season. On today's episode, we're talking about my top 12 tight ends as I give you guys my opinion, my perspective, and some analysis on why I think the 12 players that we're going to talk about have the inside track on finishing as a tight end one after Week 1 of the 2020 fantasy football season. Now, before we begin, I want to thank you guys for the incredible support. I mean, the influx of subscriber support down in the comment section, smashing that like button, it has been absolutely incredible. We've taken this channel to the next level this season. I cannot thank you guys enough. For those of you who have not yet already, smash that subscribe button. We're going to be creating content here on the daily rankings, Hidden Gems, which will be tomorrow. One of my favorite series is Sunday morning live stream. I'm going to be sprucing up some other things down the road to help you guys out for fantasy football. Again, we'll do trade talks. We'll do strength of schedule down the line. Everything will be covered from this channel. So again, subscribe. Thank you very much for those of you who have. Thank you for the incredible support over there on Patreon. For those of you who joined recently, I cannot thank you guys enough. You guys have really been an incredible support. On top of it, for those of you who are looking for more content, Patreon is down in the description. For those of you looking to get extra rankings, private community Discord, flex rankings, unlimited questions, all that kind of stuff on the daily. Either way. Now, let's talk about the tight end position going into Week 1. And I wanted to go ahead and mention some stats that I included in the 2020 draft guide that I put out. And now that the draft season is kind of gone and we're already on Thursday night, the Chiefs and the Houston Texans play later tonight, I wanted to mention a couple statistics regarding the tight end position that I found last season, which I think is pretty important as we approach the 2020 season as it pertains to top 12 tight ends. Now, last season, from weeks 1 through 17, we had top 12 tight ends every single week. We had tight end ones. Of those tight end ones, on average, every single week from weeks 1 through 17, 67.6% of them scored a single touchdown. Now, what exactly does that mean? That means 8 out of every top 12 tight end on a weekly basis throughout the entirety of 2019, 8 of those tight ends scored a touchdown. So making the tight end one list on a weekly basis requires that extra influx of points. You need the high upside of a touchdown. But as we all know, getting a touchdown in the National Football League or predicting a touchdown in fantasy football is one of the most difficult tasks that you could possibly do. That's why the tight end position is such an inconsistent place. And to be honest, that's why a lot of us try to avoid that by drafting guys like Kelce, Kittle, Andrews, Ertz, or Higbee or Waller. You're trying to avoid the inconsistencies. You're trying to get a player that, despite, even if in fact they are not able to score on a weekly basis, they're at least able to get the yardage, because 4 out of every 12 tight ends on a weekly basis last year were able to make the top 12 and be sustainable based on their receptions and their receiving yards. So again, that's a stat to look out for. Now, another one of these stats that I wanted to mention that I covered in the draft guide, 72.7% of touchdowns that the top 12 top 12 tight ends scored last season were scored in the red zone. 60.6% of those were inside the 10-yard line. Again, a lot of these tight ends are going down into the red zone, and that's where they're going to score. So what are we looking for? We're looking for guys that are going to be utilized down in the red zone, that have touchdown upside, and they're always going to be on the field. We want teams that are using formations, whether it's 11 personnel, 12 personnel. We want formations as such because we need the tight end on the field in order to give them more opportunity down on the goal line, etc. So those are a couple stats I wanted to read. Now let's go ahead and let's talk about my number 1 tight end going into the 2020 fantasy football season, Week 1. Here we go. Travis Kelce is my number 1 tight end on the week. It shouldn't really be a surprise. I know he's been dealing with a little bit of an injury, but I'm not concerned at all. The last time we saw Travis Kelce playing, he dominated in the Super Bowl, dominated in the playoffs, and he is a consistent part of this offense. And in my opinion, he's honestly the number 1 receiving option of this offense in terms of targets, usage, opportunity, and overall productivity. In comparison to Tyreek Hill, sure, Tyreek Hill has the opportunity to have these big games because of these deep yard passes and touchdown upside. But Travis Kelce is truly, in my opinion, and I'm sure many of yours, the number 1 receiving option of this Kansas City Chiefs-led offense. So again, Travis Kelce, the fact that last postseason against the Houston Texans, in that game in which they were down many points, he ended up busting out a 10 reception, 134 receiving yard, 3 receiving touchdown game, gives me a lot of confidence in him. I understand he's been dealing with an injury like I mentioned, but he's going to be ready to go tonight. He's going to dominate, hopefully. But either way, he was probably the first tight end to come off the board, and that's why you're starting him regardless. Moving on to our next tight end, we have ourselves Mark Andrews of the Baltimore Ravens. Now, Mark Andrews, again, one of these fantastic tight ends, new up-and-comer, going into his 3rd season with Lamar Jackson, had over 10 touchdowns last year, was the number 1 receiving option of that offense, similar to a Travis Kelce in comparison to his offense. But Mark Andrews is always looking for touchdown upside, and that's what he's found in his career when he's played against the Cleveland Browns. When we go back into last season's game logs and looked at exactly what he was able or capable of doing against the Cleveland Browns, he dominated against them. In the 2 contests he played against them, he averaged 5 receptions per game, but as a total had 10 receptions, 124 receiving yards, and 3 receiving touchdowns in the 2 contests against the Browns last season. Mark Andrews is a beast. He's the number 1 receiving option of this offense. I know people want Marquise Brown to be that this upcoming season, but again, Mark Andrews is that security blanket. Last season, when Mark Andrews was running routes on the field, he was targeted 30+% of the time. That means that anytime he's going out for a route, because he's a guy that's not going to always be on the field, he's not going to play the most snap counts, but when he's running routes, the plays are designed for him. They want to feed him the ball. He's a huge part of this offense, and he is, in my opinion, Lamar Jackson's favorite target to throw to. He's going to be a great option this week against Cleveland. Moving on, our number 3 option. We have ourselves George Kittle. I love George Kittle. Trust me, I love him. Having him at number 3 seems like a little bit of a disrespect or a slight, but I can absolutely tell you that it's not. George Kittle has one of the best matchups. In fact, playing against the Arizona Cardinals might be the best matchup. I know they've gone ahead and they've added players in terms of depth at the linebacker position in order to make it a little bit easier on them to cover. But the Arizona Cardinals last season gave up the most points to opposing tight ends on a weekly basis in fantasy football at a half PPR scoring format level. Again, last season, in the 1 contest that George Kittle played against Arizona, he had 6 receptions, 79 receiving yards, and a touchdown. In the other contest, he was injured, so he ended up missing it, but that's not a big deal. I think going into this week, despite all they've improved, George Kittle is going to be asked to do a lot because Deebo Samuel's dealing with injury, Brandon Ayuk dealing with injury, and outside of them, the best receiver on roster right now and seems like to be the starting wide receiver is Kendrick Bourne. And if that's going to be Jimmy Garoppolo's only receiving option, that's going to be a struggle. But thank goodness they have George Kittle to come in, step into this, spotlight and potentially dominate against a defense that has been prone in the past to being, gashed by, talented tight ends, to say the very least. Again, they've even been gashed by tight ends that are just mediocre. So I expect George Kittle to take advantage of that, have himself a great week. He's my number 3. Moving on. Zach Ertz is my number 4 overall tight end this week because he plays against the Washington football team. And what we know from the Washington football team last year, they were giving up the 3rd most points to opposing tight ends on a weekly basis. And in the games that Zach Ertz played against them last year, sure, he didn't have much touchdown upside, but I think this week we could potentially see that with the amount of injuries this team has sustained this offseason, with a limited snap count from Miles Sanders potentially this upcoming weekend, with Jalen Reagor potentially being on that fringe of either making or missing this game. I could potentially see Zach Ertz, Dallas Goedert being utilized heavily, but first and foremost, it's going to be Ertz's opportunity. He is the red zone threat of this offense. He is the number 1 receiving option of said offense. Last season, when he played against the Washington football team, in the 2 contests, he totaled 10 total receptions, 115 receiving yards, and a touchdown. I expect him to have himself a really good week here with Carson Wentz. That combo should be great overall. Again, you're starting Ertz if you have him. Regardless, he should be great. Moving on, we have ourselves Tyler Higbee. Tyler Higbee came on extremely strong at the back end of the 2019 season. In fact, from weeks 13 through 17, he was averaging 15 plus fantasy points a game. That in itself, that opportunity wasn't a surprise because Jared Goff on a weekly basis was funneling 10 plus targets in his direction because they had kind of moving away from this 3 wide receiver idea that we have to feed Brandon Cooks the ball. And though they have Van Jefferson coming in to fill that spot or they have Josh Reynolds kind of in that number 3 wide receiver slot, I expect Tyler Higbee to be the number 3 in targets behind a Cooper Kupp and a Robert Woods and then it's Tyler Higbee, right? So as of this moment in time, I'm thinking to myself, against the Dallas Cowboys, who gave up the 4th most points to opposing tight ends last year, who last season against Tyler Higbee allowed Tyler Higbee to accumulate 12 total receptions and 111 total receiving yards against them. My goodness, Tyler Higbee is in an incredible spot. The linebacking core, though they get Kyle Van Der Esch back from the injury that he sustained last year, they're still the same core. They still have Sean Lee, they still have Jalen Smith, they still have Van Der Esch. So, what's the difference? Are you going to be able to cover him better? I don't think that's going to be the case. I think Tyler Higbee is going to be a huge part of this offense in week 1, and I think he's going to be able to expose those linebackers for the poor coverage that they had, especially last time, this upcoming week. So he's my number 5 going into this week. Moving on. We have ourselves Darren Waller here at the number 6 spot. Darren Waller was an incredible breakout tight end last year. For the entirety of the season, he was fantastic, but there were times that Darren Waller kind of fell off. There were weeks in which he was putting up 5-6 points, and in those weeks, you kind of lost faith because, again, those were 6 of his 10 total performances last year in which he was, putting up less than 8 fantasy points. And though that's not great, that's the nature of the tight end position. If you're not having those big yardage games and you're not having touchdowns, again, Darren Waller only scored 3 last season. A lot of it had to do with his total yardage games. And again, when you want to see Darren Waller succeed and you're not going to give him the red zone targets or red zone opportunity, you're going to have to feed him targets throughout the game, get him yards after the catch. And that's what they did last year, but they're going to have to do that once again. Last season, when Darren Waller was targeted 7+ times in a game, he averaged 13.89 fantasy points per game in a half PPR scoring format. So if you want Darren Waller to succeed, Derek Carr has got to feed him the ball with more offensive threats on the field, with Bryan Edwards and Henry Ruggs being named the starting wide receivers of this offense. Having a healthy Josh Jacobs in the backfield, bringing in more tight end help in Jason Witten, I could potentially see this team spreading out the offense, allowing Darren Waller to dominate the middle of the defense. And in my opinion, seeing as the Carolina Panthers have gone ahead and unfortunately, not been able to fill in the shoes of a Luke Kuechly, their field general. I think the middle of the field is going to be very susceptible. I think Darren Waller is going to be able to dominate this upcoming week. He's my number 6 against the Carolina Panthers. If I said Oakland Raiders in that entire stint, I apologize. I know it's the Las Vegas Raiders. It's just really hard for me to switch it in my mind. Regardless, moving on. We have ourselves Hayden Hurst as my number 7 overall tight end this week. Hayden Hurst fills into pretty big shoes. Austin Hooper was incredible last year for the Atlanta Falcons offense, but I don't think that Hayden Hurst is going to get less opportunity. In fact, I think he'll get similar opportunity. And in said opportunity against the Seattle Seahawks, the Seattle Seahawks gave up the second most points to opposing tight ends last season per game in a half PPR scoring format. Because even though they have Bobby Wagner, KJ Wright, they have good linebackers there, they're not able to cover the tight end position because maybe they're just, they can't do it. I know they're bringing Jamal Adams, but Jamal Adams, not really too much of a concern in terms of the, passing game. I think he's more of a fill the box kind of safety. He's their Cam Chancellor this upcoming season. So as of right now, what do I expect from Hayden Hurst? I expect this offense to be able to dominate against this defense, or to an extent to where at least they get down to the red zone. Hayden Hurst is a big body target. Last year, Austin Hooper had about 6 catches, 65 yards, and a touchdown against the Seattle Seahawks defense with Matt Schaub at quarterback. With Matt Ryan, that's an automatic improvement. So I think there is a good range in which we're going to potentially see Hayden Hurst utilizing the red zone. But again, we're going into it blindly. We haven't seen any preseason action. We haven't seen how many formations that he's going to be playing in. This is a blind guess that I'm potentially anticipating them to use the tight end position enough based on their history and the offensive coordinator, Dirk Cutter, and how much he loves to use the tight end position and utilize that down in the red zone. So I'm hoping Hayden Hurst can step up and, kind of show up this upcoming Sunday against the Seattle team. Either way, he's my number 7. My number 8 tight end on the week is Evan Engram. And my thought process is pretty straightforward. Last season, prior to his injury, he was averaging 10+ fantasy points per game. That in itself, fantastic. As of right now, you get yourself Jason Garrett, and you lose Pat Shurmur as your head coach / offensive coordinator. Jason Garrett, last season with the Dallas Cowboys, I know it was Kellen Moore that was the offensive coordinator, but Jason Garrett's an offensive-minded head coach. They always want to use the tight end position. They targeted the tight end position in Dallas 120+ times. If Evan Engram can stay healthy this year and continuously see targets, I expect him to be fine. I know the Pittsburgh Steelers have a great defense, but in terms of covering the tight end position with their linebackers, they haven't done a great job or haven't been elite in terms of coverage of the tight end position. So I think Evan Engram could find a pocket there in that defense and honestly could be Daniel Jones' favorite target this upcoming season. I know it's a long stretch because of the fact of his injury history, but if we could put that behind ourselves and look forward and hope for the best for an Evan Engram, again, he's another one of these tight ends that look like wide receivers on the field. You can literally put them out anywhere, whether it's out wide in the slot, line them up, next to your offensive tackle. He's going to be able to produce, and I expect big things from Evan Engram this week. I'm rolling him out there as my number 8. Moving on. Hunter Henry's my number 9. So as of right now, considering Mike Williams is probably going to miss week 1, we have Keenan Allen and Austin Eckler as the 2 leading receiving targets of this Los Angeles Chargers offense. Outside of them, I'm thinking it's Hunter Henry. I really don't know any of these other wide receivers outside of Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. They don't have a solid number 3. They've been trying to figure that out at camp if you've been watching Hard Knocks. In terms of the wide receiver position, outside of that, nothing much. Tight end position, not really interested. We have ourselves a couple of these younger running backs like Justin Jackson and or Josh Kelly. I don't expect them to get any of the receptions over Eckler. So they're going to look towards Hunter Henry against the Cincinnati Bengals defense. And I expect Hunter Henry, like he did last year, after coming back from his injury, averaging 10+ points a game, to be utilized in this passing game by Tyrod Taylor, regardless of how the offense and or this game script is going. They're going to utilize the tight end. They always have. And I expect Hunter Henry to once again find himself in a pretty good position here this upcoming season, especially down in the red zone. He was utilized a lot with Phillip Rivers. Hopefully can find that again with Tyrod Taylor. Moving on, we have ourselves Jared Cook. Speaking of scoring touchdowns and being utilized down in the red zone, Jared Cook had the second most receiving touchdowns amongst all tight ends last year. He had 9 receiving touchdowns, only behind Mark Andrews' 10. Now, that being said, Jared Cook only caught 4 touchdowns in the red zone. So that means 5 of his touchdowns last year came from outside of the red zone, which means he's a big play guy. Now, he goes against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which last season gave up the 7th most points to opposing tight ends on a weekly basis in half PPR. Now, when we look at Jared Cook and we think to ourselves, this is a very stacked offense. Is he going to get enough opportunity with Alvin Kamara, Latavius Murray, Emmanuel Sanders, Michael Thomas, even Taysom Hill a little bit here and there? I still think that Jared Cook is going to be utilized, and that was kind of a part of what this offense transformed into last season. I mean, in the first 4 games of the 2019 season, Jared Cook was MIA. He was on a milk carton. I was looking for him. Many of us who drafted him could not find him to save our lives. But after he got past his injury, week 5, 6, this is when Jared Cook finally reestablished himself. For the last 10 games of the 2019 season, he averaged 13.3 fantasy points per game in a half PPR scoring format and really dominated. A lot of that had to do with touchdowns. But if you're going to be in an offense that's going to score a lot of points against a defense that's not great against opposing tight ends, I expect the possibility of Jared Cook to step up and really have himself a good week here to be an actual reality. So I expect Jared Cook to be fine. I expect him to be a top 10 tight end with a lot of touchdown upside, of course. Moving on. We have ourselves Rob Gronkowski. Robbie Gronk. You know, here's the thing about Gronk. Again, we don't know what we're going to see from him. We obviously expect a healthy version. We expect, like Bruce Arians has said, Rob Gronkowski looks healthier than he did 5 years ago. He looks like he's got fresh legs, fresh body, not injured, doesn't have to wear the elbow brace, all that kind of jazz. As of this moment in time, Rob Gronkowski is probably going to see a little bit of a boost in targets. I had him at number 12, 13 prior to recording today's video, but with the information regarding Mike Evans kind of coming out, seeing as he's been missing practice for the last couple of days dealing with a soft tissue injury, that in itself is a very concerning matter. If in fact he ends up re-aggravating that could definitely put him back. So he's going to probably be a game time decision. That being said, if you go on ahead and miss a game with Mike Evans, besides Chris Godwin getting a boost, Gronkowski, Scotty Miller, OJ Howard, maybe some of these running backs catching the ball out of the backfield, they get a boost. But Gronk, first and foremost, will because of his connection with Brady. So I expect them to definitely be able to at least give Gronk a little bit more this week if in fact Mike Evans misses. Even if Mike Evans plays, he could definitely get hurt at any moment. So I think Gronk is definitely going to be a big part of this offense this upcoming week. He's my number 11 tight end. I'm hoping he's back for good and he's going to be a monster like he used to be. I mean, let's not forget, like the last time he was in a fully healthy season, which was 2017, I think he finished as the number 2 tight end, only behind Travis Kelce by like a half a point. So he was pretty relevant, not too far long ago. Anyway, we go ahead and we move on to our final tight end here. And though there were a lot of trains of thought and a lot of players that I wanted to mention and or talk about, I've gone on ahead and I'm gonna plant my flag. I'm very confident in the idea that Noah Fant can be a top 12 tight end this upcoming week. Now, the idea of Blake Jarwin and Goedert, we'll talk about right after we talk about Noah Fant. But I think with Noah Fant and the new offensive coordinator, Pat Shurmur, coming in, formerly of the New York Giants, as you can see above him, Evan Engram, I think he's going to come in and he's going to want to utilize the tight end position because he did that all of last year. Even with Evan Engram going down, Rhett Ellison and Caden Smith, the 2 other tight ends on the New York Giants last season, even with Evan Engram out of the lineup, those 2 guys were averaging a combined 10 points per game for the New York Giants last season. So if you go on ahead and think to yourself, okay, Pat Shurmur wants to use the tight end position, we have ourselves another young quarterback with Drew Lock. We got to surround him with tight ends. Noah Fant, one of the most athletic, big body, he's 6'5", runs a 4.5. He's a monster on the field. You just got to be able to get him into space and feed him the ball. And we've seen them do that in the past. Last season in Denver, they're going to probably try to reutilize that. I think Noah Fant, I've been talking about him all offseason. I think he is the guy that's going to make that second-year jump. hopefully this upcoming season. So he's my number 2, with the idea that Pat Shurmur is going to be able to funnel target him, or at least help Drew Lock feed him the rock down the line against the Tennessee Titans. Again, the Tennessee Titans last year weren't great against the tight end position. In fact, they were giving up the 10th most points to opposing tight ends last year in a half PPR setting. A lot of touchdowns per game, to be honest, the tight end position. So if you get down to the red zone, Noah Fant could be a huge option there. Outside of that, I wanted to mention Blake Jarwin and Dallas Goedert. I think Blake Jarwin has a argument to be made into, potentially joining the top 12, but I leave him at like 13, 14, almost tied with Goedert at this moment in time, because Blake Jarwin is going against a very easy matchup in my eyes. Doing the grades and looking at what potentially the Rams have at the linebacking position with Corey Littleton gone, going to the Raiders, they don't really have a coverage linebacker. And that in itself is going to be worrisome for this team if in fact they're not able to cover with a safety. Sure, they can bring down, Rapp and or Josh Johnson, but I don't think that's going to be able to cover a Blake Jarwin, who down in the red zone can easily score in this offense, especially if the Dallas Cowboys are really starting to roll and they're spreading out the defense with their 3 wide receiver sets, 11 personnel. Outside of that, Dallas Goedert, he plays against the Washington football team, similar to Zach Ertz, has just as much opportunity and or potential to score this upcoming week in that matchup because of the injuries at the positions surrounding them. Again, another great option. Those are like my top 14 guys that I would think of as of this moment in time. Outside of them, it's a lot of risky / reward, a high risk, high reward kind of players that I'm not really interested in buying this upcoming week. I think these are great enough, and I think hopefully there's one of these guys available for you to start this week. And that's pretty much it. I want to thank you guys for watching. I really do appreciate it. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Again, we're going to be creating fantasy football content for the entirety of the 2020 season. Again, smash that like button down below. Tonight's prediction, I expect the Chiefs to win by a substantial margin, but not really. I think the Chiefs were a -9. I don't think that the Houston Texans get blown out that badly. So, in terms of spread, that's that. But either way, I think the Chiefs do win. The defending champions come out strong. I'm excited to see what Clyde Edwards-Helaire is capable of this tonight. So either way, thank you everybody for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Smash the like button. And until next time, tomorrow, Hidden Gems. I'll see you guys. Peace.